Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for another edition of the Esports Connection, where the esports industry goes to connect. Streaming to, well, we'll call it the center of the esports universe today, here at the University of California, Irvine's Beal Applied Innovation Center. With one of the guys, actually a couple of the guys, sitting at the center of that universe, trying to figure out, what are we looking at here? Jay DeShong.
Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. If you don't know, now you know. My name is Jay DeShong. I'm the host of the Esports Connection, and with me today is Billy Sprout. He comes from the world of Collegiate Esports, a self-proclaimed expert, and for me, titan of Collegiate Esports. So, Billy, why don't you tell the people who you are and where you're from?
Hi, everyone. My name is Billy Sprout. I can hear myself. That's off-putting.
Sure.
I'm glad I like the sound of my own voice.
Right. Your voice is beautiful, Billy.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
I'm from Santa Monica, California. I just moved there recently. I was living in Irvine for 5 years. I used to work at Blizzard, running all of their collegiate esports tournaments. Worked for a startup for a couple years, and now I am a independent esports consultant.
Independent esports consultant, and that's almost scary language in our world right now, right, Billy? So
Yeah.
Before I jump into where you are right now and maybe how scary that world is or not, why don't you tell me how you got into gaming and esports? So first, tell me about your early life. How'd you get into games?
The more I think about it, the longer, like an earlier back, I started playing games.
Sure.
My first game that I can recall was Sim Theme Park on Windows 98.
That's awesome. Definitely older than me, Billy.
Very retro, very much a like young adult version of the other Sim and Tycoon games.
Sure.
You could build a little theme park and put like dinosaur roller coasters and stuff, and
That's awesome.
clean up messes and stuff.
Is that the beginning of being able to fly roller coasters into your competitors so that their score goes down? Is that the beginning of that? Yeah, in Roller Coaster Tycoon, you can do that?
Now that I think about it, yeah, that's exactly what I do in real life now. I am kind of a theme park connoisseur in esports.
Right, okay.
If you
Sure.
don't think about it too much.
Sure, right, yeah, don't think about it at all. Yep, and that makes perfect sense. Yep.
When I first started getting into actual esports, it was before we even called it that. It was just competitive gaming.
Sure.
There was a game called Tribes.
Yep.
With a bunch of different sequels and spin-offs and spiritual successors, and I kind of got mired up in that community. I wasn't good, but I was there long enough that I ended up on a team, and I was competing with people and building camaraderie and connecting with people at a level that I could never really connect with people in person.
Sure.
So it kind of served as a Trojan horse for individual social development.
Sure.
For me.
And how old are you around this time when you're kind of realizing gaming's your thing and maybe you're home?
High school and early college.
Got it.
And so after the early college, once I realized how important gaming was to my life and how many skills I had unintentionally gleaned through the social gaming community, I was like, okay, well, I'm in college now. I have 2 friends out of the thousands of people on this campus.
Right.
I am going
Two's more than none.
Yeah. Infinitely more than 0.
Right.
Which is how many I had when I started. So trending well, but not a really great number.
Sure.
I was like, okay, I'm going to start my own gaming club. And instead of actually starting one, I joined one that was kind of on its last legs. It was the Yukon Competitive Gaming Club.
Sure.
A bunch of very elitist StarCraft players. Rightfully elitist. They were very good, way better than me. My cannon rushing never worked on them. So I was kind of at the bottom echelon of high society at this competitive gaming club.
Sure.
But the people who were running it were about to graduate. And so they said, hey, do you want to take this over? And I said, yes, but I don't want to take this over. I want to make a different one that doesn't have the word competitive in the name, scaring off anyone who doesn't think they're competitive.
Sure.
And most people don't think they're competitive. So I started the Yukon Gaming Club, got a bunch of funding, ran a bunch of events, spent a bunch of my own money on pizza for viewing parties. And that's where I met like the dozens and dozens of people.
And what year are you doing this?
My sophomore year. So my freshman year I was a very lonely boy, but I was still playing games online.
Sure.
Had not quite yet made the transition from, okay, esports online to social gaming in person, because
Sure.
I think that's the distinction. If it's esports, if you're not looking the person in the eye,
Right.
It's social gaming if you can look them in the eye and go get dinner with them afterwards.
Sure.
And social gaming is where the actual transformation happens from quiet, reserved, underdeveloped nerd to really cool, awesome person and functional member of society. And so that's where I made that transition when I started that gaming club. And those are my origins. We played a lot of Dota 2 at the time because it had just come out. That's how old I am.
And so you're talking about a lot of these old games. What date was that? Is this 2019, 2020, 2017? Because I got involved in 2017, 2019. So what years of this for you?
2012 was when I started the gaming club, because
Got
I
it.
started college in 2011. And I was there for a long time. I think it was in my 5th or 6th year in
Sure.
college. I was a super senior.
Sure.
Because I dropped out, went to community college to get better grades, went back in, got a job offer from Blizzard right after I could not get my deposit refunded, and dropped out and worked at Blizzard
Wow.
in 2016.
I didn't know that about you, Billy. So are you also a college dropout working in the world of collegiate esports?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I did not know that. That's really cool news. So, how did you go from being a college dropout to having a company like Activision Blizzard, who is still one of the titans in gaming, being interested in you enough to pick you up without that piece of paper?
Yeah, it was actually difficult to get in because the people I was working with at the time, that was the TESPA organization, which had just recently been bought out by Blizzard.
And for the people who don't know, tell the people exactly what TESPA is.
Oh man, so TESPA was the collegiate arm of Blizzard Entertainment, and they had two pillars. One of which was the community group, which was an association of gaming clubs across the country. One of which was mine. That's how I initially got TESPA's attention. The other pillar was a series of competitive national tournaments, only for college students. So I got into TESPA through the community side because I wasn't a good competitor. But then I felt myself more attracted to the competitive side, specifically running tournaments and tournament operations, because that's a lot of what I did in high school. So I had a lot of the tribal knowledge of how gaming competitions were supposed to happen, what we hated and disliked and loved about different tournament organizers. So that's what I started doing in 2016 after contracting for TESPA for 2 to 3 years. But I was effectively the Blizzard Collegiate Esports tournament organizer
Sure.
when I started.
Sure, and that's 2016, 2017 is when you start with Activision Blizzard?
Yeah, formally.
Got it. Okay, so when you're with there, tell us what that looks like. So you're kind of coming from this world where communities are kind of budding on college campuses, competitive teams are starting to bud in the world of collegiate esports, right? What was it like to build one of the first formal systems for, I guess, competitive college tournaments? Tell me what that was like.
Well, I had a lot of help. I didn't build it actually myself.
Sure.
I was a student of a guy named Logan Fishel, who was running things way before I was. I forgot how to talk there for a second.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I was hired by Logan Fishel, who was the grand minister of all these tournaments.
Sure.
Learned everything I could from him.
Yep.
I'm really good at Excel now. I'm really good at logistics. I'm really good at automation, because that's his primary approach to competitive esports, is automate as much as you can,
Right.
and polish the hell out of the rest.
And so from the world of Activision Blizzard and Collegiate Esports, were there any, I guess, big moments where you noticed that esports was starting to be, I guess, more important in the world? Because before it was kind of gaming, right? So was there a moment where you noticed, oh, this is a real thing and this is getting bigger? Was there a moment when you were there and you noticed that?
I think the entire time I was there, we were pushing for that transformation to happen.
Sure.
And I think over time it did. I think maybe 2 to 3 years into TESPA existing, it started the transition. So before I even started there, I mean, I was joining this group of 5 to 6 people who had just been working their butts off to pull all these communities together,
Right.
and pull all these tournaments together, and the competitors that would compete in those. There was a very subtle and slow shift because we were working in academia, and as you well know, Jade, academia is very slow moving.
Yes, extremely.
Yeah. Until they feel like they're behind the bandwagon, in which situation they go a lot faster, because they don't want to be that university that's outdated and old and behind the times. But until they feel that alarm and that FOMO, they're very slow.
Right.
So it was a lot more of a quick transformation on the student side. These gaming clubs were getting thousands of members, probably either the biggest group of like-minded people on a campus, or the most diverse group of like-minded people
Absolutely.
on campus. Like, because you could have like a white students alliance or something. They wouldn't make that, but if you had that, that would be like 80% of the population.
Right.
Versus a gaming population would be 20% of the population, but they would be the most diverse group there, because what else do this many people from this many areas of the world have in common but gaming? Sure. And there's an incredible transformation that happens when you pull those people who have that thing in common into the public together. Just
Sure.
put them in the cafeteria together. They're going to be dorky, they're going to be awkward, but they're going to form friendships and make memories there that they will remember for the rest of their lives. So that started happening. These gaming clubs got huge. My gaming club wasn't even huge. I think at most we had 200 people on the list,
Sure.
and maybe 15 to 20 people at the weekly gatherings.
Sure.
Super small.
Yep.
But then these groups like UC Riverside started popping up. UC Irvine was always at the cutting edge of this esports transformation.
Even when I was there, 2018, 2019, they were still there. Yep, still are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the transformation took a bit of a hit in terms of pacing when the universities started getting formally involved, because there was a culture shift that had to happen.
Sure.
Everything was super scrappy. Everything was super, oh, I'll buy the pizza on my own money and just work extra hard this week or skip a couple classes. There was a very scrappy DIY atmosphere, very FGC. I think the FGC is still undergoing this transformation, but the PC gaming and console gaming crowds underwent it a little bit sooner.
And FGC being the fighting games communities, for
Yes.
those who don't know. Yep. Go
Exactly.
ahead.
They literally refused to switch off of CRT monitors. That's how.
Those old style TVs.
Yeah,
Huh? You're right.
they're obstinate, and I think they're the healthiest gaming community out there as a result of their obstinacy.
Sure.
They're very difficult to like pull off of their game. They have a lot of momentum, and they don't like to change directions. But the PC and console communities had to undergo a culture shift of some sort to help the university, like the academia, the faculty and staff, understand what they were doing,
Right.
and B, find a way to get the faculty and staff involved in a way that was value add, rather than just, oh, hey, look at us, fellow kids, we're doing the esport, come join us.
Right.
So even UCI, who got into it super early on, Mark Adepi, who is the founder of the UCI Esports program, was working his butt off to make that transition happen and make it organic, make it authentic, and most importantly, make sure it kept getting funding.
Right.
Because they were getting funding as a student club, but you can get orders of magnitude more funding if you're an official student program.
Absolutely.
Or an official university program versus just a bunch of kids doing stuff.
Doing games.
Yeah.
Right, is what you hear in a lot of places. A bunch of kids playing games.
And
yeah.
that was part of the culture shift that had happened. These universities had to realize, oh, this group of students who are like in their 5th year of college have built a bigger community and a more cohesive culture on our campus than we have managed to do in 20 years. They had to realize that and approach the clubs with that kind of reverence.
Sure.
But they didn't. They kind of just said, oh, hey kids, we'll give you $2,000 a year if we get to tell the world we have an esports program and start recruiting people on that through that lens.
Sure.
So there was a culture shift on both sides. There had to be a dilution of the kind of arrogance that academia has built around itself over
Sure.
the past 200, 300, 400 years.
Sure.
And a bit of a more professional angle being taken, approach being taken by the gaming clubs who are used to just completely doing it scrappy.
Sure.
Lugging these PCs around campus, lugging these CRTs around campus, hoping you don't drop it because they're no longer being made. And that's what we experienced probably through 2015 to 2018.
Sure.
I think that was a really transformative era. And that's when we started seeing, well, while I was still at Blizzard, the rise of varsity esports programs.
Sure.
That was the ideal end product for a lot of these schools because, again, they didn't really understand the value of the community that was there.
Right.
So they were distracted more by the shiny, flashy, competitive teams.
And you say distracted. What do you mean by distracted? Do you think it should be a different way?
Yeah.
Could be a different way.
I think the approach, the varsity first approach, made sense logically in the minds of these academics, but these groups that were comprising 20% of the student population, they were not all competitors. Like when I was back at UConn, I took the competitive term out of the club name.
Right.
Just because it was an unnecessary gatekeeper to people who just wanted to play socially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think universities, because they recognized the amount of money that they could potentially be making through competitive sports, although none of them are really making as much money as they say they are,
Right.
or they say they could be,
Right.
there was a very easy one-to-one translation of, oh, this is just NCAA student-athlete exploitation, but online.
Right.
So we can
The video games instead of leather balls.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Are they made of leather? Is that
Yeah, I think pigskin for football, right? They call it the old pigskin. So I guess that'd be pig, not leather, right? So
I think that it's pig leather.
right. So going back to it, Billy.
Anyway.
So on the building of those varsity programs, I kind of know one of my introductions to you was through Heroes of the Dorm, right? I didn't participate in Heroes of the Dorm, but I would say that's one of the first big moments that Collegiate Esports had, maybe competitively, right, with all these varsity programs. So tell me about Heroes of the Dorm and what the impact was for colleges, for Activision Blizzard, maybe even for some of the clubs that were running.
Yeah, for sure. I think we made a lot of noise in the first couple of years. Heroes of the Dorm was a game. Was a tournament played within the game Heroes of the Storm.
Right.
Sorry, I'm digging this
No, you
out
got
of
that
the
one right.
memory archives.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to dust off these memory banks here.
Right.
It was probably one of the bigger tournaments that had happened to date that were video game tournaments. And the final prize, like the grand prize, was full college tuition for up to 4 years.
Wow.
For everyone that was on the team that won.
Incredible.
Granted, the second prize was maybe like $4,000 worth of merchandise and gear.
But 4 years of college, right?
But 4 years of college if you make it to the first.
Right.
It had the prize distribution of maybe, it's probably the worst prize distribution of any tournament ever.
Goodness.
Where 99% of the potential value, depending on what your tuition was piled onto that first place.
Right.
But because the stakes were so high, there was a lot of drama, there was a lot of excitement. And even around this game that at the time was not even really taking off, Heroes of the Storm, there was an electricity around the competition. And because Heroes of the Storm was a MOBA, multiplayer online battle arena, very common now game genre,
Right.
It was very easy for people to transfer their skills from other MOBAs over to Heroes of the Storm and kind of say, okay, I'm going pro on this and trying to win my college tuition.
Sure.
And because there was so much electricity behind this combination of video games and tuition at stake, we got the attention of ESPN, Facebook Live, a bunch of other groups probably that I'm forgetting now.
Sure.
We got a lot of press, we got a lot of impressions, and it was kind of one of the founding pillars of the Heroes of the Storm press run of like, hey, we're finally out of beta/alpha because they were in development hell for a while.
Sure.
This is our love note to the esports universe because MOBAs are so intrinsically connected to esports, and we're going to try to change some students' lives at the same time.
Sure. And so would you say, because a lot of times in esports we hear of getting eyeballs and getting impressions, right? And then trying to figure out how to convert those eyeballs into dollars, right? So did that work for you guys when you got all that attention and you got all those fans, you got all these students engaged? Did it turn into what Activision Blizzard hoped for, or how did it end up?
No, it did not. I think we took, so we did 4 total years of Heroes of the Dorm. The first 2 years were very much the honeymoon phase. There was an incredible energy around it. There were live events happening every year where people were lining up around the block to get in.
Sure.
And they were all wearing Heroes of the Dorm and Heroes of the Storm merch and stuff. And then the third year, we switched platforms to Facebook Live because they at the time were trying to make Facebook gaming a thing. I think they're still trying to do that.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, the offer they gave us was just too good to pass up.
Right.
But unfortunately, Facebook gaming was kind of a death sentence to anything that was trying to get most of its impressions via streaming. So that and obviously the slow development of the game, the competition that was arising from League of Legends and Dota 2, as they built up their own esports scenes, took too many eyeballs away.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously most of the eyeballs were on Twitch.
Right.
So we lost eyeballs there. And the energy kind of faded along with the energy around Heroes of the Storm as a game, because that a couple years later was put basically on the back burner.
Right.
But those 4 years were an incredible 4 years of my life. It was a lot of fun. I flew out to Florida to
awesome.
put out an esports program out on live TV.
That's awesome.
Like actual TV, not just Twitch.
Right.
Our production cube metal box thing got struck by lightning.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Sounds about esports.
Yeah.
You want to tell the story about your lightning box or what?
Well, that was just it. We got struck by lightning. A few of the devices shorted out, and we were like, did we just almost die?
Yes? Question mark.
But we're live, so we're gonna keep going.
Let's keep going. Yeah, we got a show to run, right?
Yeah,
Got it. So
that's esports, baby.
So right. So for you guys from that point with Heroes of the Dorm, did TESPA keep going? Did we try new things? How did it go after Heroes of the Dorm and after you kind of had your first moment of truth?
Yeah, during those 4 years, I think Dorm was a real boon to the publicity, or at least public awareness of TESPA's community side,
Sure.
as well as our competitive side. There was a huge amount of participation and energy from the actual competitors around Dorm. And as Overwatch came out the year later, there was a very easy transition there from, we have a Heroes of the Storm team to, okay, they're playing League of Legends and now we're recruiting our CSGO players to come play Overwatch.
Right.
Because it's objectively easier and objectively more fun.
Right.
And that was a really great force transfer for us, because at that point our clubs were bigger than they had ever been. There were people coming to viewing parties for Heroes of the Dorm to root for their team to get through our version of March Madness. And obviously the community team all that time was working their butts off, pulling these people together, getting these events to be as big as they could, pulling together sponsors to throw free swag at these events.
And I was there for that time. That's when we got introduced to each other. It was 2017, 2019. I started my Overwatch team at Mississippi State, so I was there for all those things. So for the Overwatch side of things, when you guys transitioned and you were saying it worked, did it turn into something that Activision Blizzard kind of wanted to see that didn't happen with Heroes of the Dorm, or was it as unsuccessful as Heroes of the Dorm?
I think they learned the lesson there, well, I say that, but they really didn't learn it with Overwatch. You can't just build a de facto esports scene for a game that hasn't been launched yet.
Right.
They kind of learned that lesson with Overwatch, but also they didn't at the same time.
Sure.
It's a very tricky industry.
And why do you say that? Why do you feel like they learned and they didn't at the same time?
Well, they didn't do a Heroes of the Dorm. They didn't throw all their eggs into one basket.
Sure.
What they did is they took their eggs and everyone else's eggs and threw it in a different basket and then let that basket sit there and rot for 2 years.
Sure.
Yep. Obviously, there's...
The basket being Overwatch itself, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Sure.
Well, the Overwatch League specifically.
Sure.
They basically said for 2 years, you can't run any community Overwatch tournaments because we're going to do our own thing. Hold on, we're going to run.
And that's Activision Blizzard telling basically people like you and me that we can't run the thing that's been our bloodline for the last 2 to 4 years, right? And obviously that takes a toll on our different communities. So talk about that. Talk about the toll that takes, taking away grassroots and the toll that takes on an esports community.
Well, you're pulling the rug out from under yourself.
Right.
Because not only are all these third-party organizers sitting on that rug, your entire infrastructure is built on that rug and those organizers, and this metaphor is getting out of hand. But
and those people, yep.
Yeah. Right. But, I mean... in the effort to make a premier, unique, exclusive product, red carpet and everything, they, again, just kind of left everyone high and dry for a while. And that was the 2 years when the energy behind Overwatch was the highest.
Right.
So by the time they launched the Overwatch League with all these incredible teams, all these incredible organizations putting all of their creative energy behind it, it was like a lot of the wind was taken out of the sails.
Sure.
And we could talk about the Overwatch League for years and years and years. But
years.
I mean, I worked under that team for 4 years, and I knew just how much they cared about Overwatch, but also how much difficulty they were facing in making their dreams about Overwatch come true.
Sure.
And
if you had to, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. All the while, we were running a very successful Overwatch Collegiate circuit.
Sure.
Because we were kind of a loophole in that we had a tacit license from Blizzard because we were owned by Blizzard.
Right. And talk about that real quick, because a lot of people don't know about tournament licenses and gaming licenses. So talk to people about why you need that and what it means in the world of gaming and esports and why you don't need it in traditional sports.
Well, legally speaking, you can't own the intellectual property of football, right?
Right.
NCAA has gotten as close as they can to owning it, but
Right.
they don't own it.
Right.
You can run a football tournament whenever you want.
Anytime, anywhere.
Yeah. When you make a video game, you own the intellectual property, and therein you own the right to use that intellectual property at events, tournaments, viewing parties, literally
What
anything.
have you. Right.
Even to all the way down to the merch. So like you can't really make your own Mario plushie, for example,
Right.
without getting sued off your butt
Right.
by
Or
Nintendo.
Overwatch plushie. Right.
And in
Right.
this case, Overwatch plushie.
Right.
And in this particular scenario, we were the only group that could really run Overwatch tournaments. And it was unfortunate because we were restricted to collegiate people.
Right.
But in that same vein, a lot of the competitive energy around Overwatch was funneled towards colleges.
Right.
And that resulted in a huge explosion in the number of varsity teams that were
Right.
being formed for Overwatch. I think we had maybe like 150, 200 varsity teams.
We're top 64 up there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was like, we didn't know who was under us. Yeah.
I mean,
A lot
I didn't either. It's fine.
Right? Yeah, a lot of different schools, so 200 to 300 different schools. And Billy, like we kind of know, TESPA is defunct now. The Overwatch League is largely defunct to a lot of people, especially gamers like us, right?
Well, they just laid off almost all their staff.
Absolutely, right. Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah, and so if you had to put your finger on maybe one or two things that kind of caused this, what would you say that was the big reason or the big misstep in things being the way that they are right now in the world of collegiate and professional esports?
I think it goes all the way back to leaning too heavily on putting too much weight on the competitive side of esports, when that will only ever be a niche within the overall esports community.
Sure.
99% of people in an esports club will never play a game of ranked in their life, or
Right.
they'll play ranked, but they won't play in a tournament.
And they're playing ranked with their friend because they want to at least compete, right?
Yes.
Air quotes, compete.
Yeah.
right?
There's 5 other cohorts of people who played the game for completely different reasons.
Sure.
And so expecting people to either be really interested in that competitive side and putting all the weight there, or expecting people who aren't really interested in the competitive side to then go watch that video game, if
Sure.
you're not going to very quickly and very effectively make a compelling like spectating product.
Sure.
Which I think the LCS has done a relatively good job on. CSGO seems to have managed to do that.
Sure.
Valorant is doing a great job, but Overwatch never really clicked from a watchability and just a general entertainment perspective.
Especially because of the game itself. That was one that was almost hard to get past because of just the title itself and the difficulties with viewing it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
It's like trying to watch a color wheel.
Right, yeah, with 12 people on either side rolling their own color wheel, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so you spoke about the kind of the dichotomy between communities and competitive efforts on a college campus, and especially within an esports club or program. What do you feel like the bridge could or should be between those different groups on a campus? Because I know it can be hard.
I think you can learn a lot of lessons from the universities who had this issue already and struggled through this culture shift.
Yep.
Which is to say, you have to go back to the students always at the end of the day. The
Right.
students or the community, they're interchangeable here because obviously I have a very collegiate lens on the way I look at the esports world. But
Sure.
you have to go to those communities and say, hey, what do you want? What are you doing by yourself already, and how can we enrich that? You're never going to be able to build a top-down solution because the people at the top have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
From a community side, they're going to look at it and say, oh, we can just do it like sports. But
Right.
sports is a completely irreplicable phenomenon.
Right.
You can't make baseball happen again
Right.
just by building the MLB, right?
And replacing the baseball with Overwatch.
Yeah,
right?
so
Right.
I'm kind of taking their fixation here and turning it against them. Like, this sports lens will not work
Sure.
because esports is its own thing. It's its own phenomenon. It has its own pace, its own requirements, and the communities are completely different.
And its own people. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, Billy, I mean, we're kind of, I wouldn't say we're in shambles in the esports world, but we're definitely taking a couple steps back, right? I think everybody who's in the industry and around the industry knows that we're going backwards a little bit from what a lot of us are calling the investor era, right? We had a lot of big money come in, a lot of big expectations come in. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from this place where we've got $6 million being handed back to organizations that paid 5 years ago? Where do we go from here?
Is that number confirmed?
It is. That's what I saw.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I saw in the article. $6 million back to all the teams who decided not to continue in operations this year.
Where do we go? That's a big question.
Sure.
I mean, we need to unleash the grassroots organizers. There
Sure.
needs to be no more license restrictions from the publisher side for these games that have tried and failed to do it themselves.
Sure.
Obviously, there are some exceptions. I think Valve and Riot are doing exceptionally good jobs, at least building their esports in the right way.
Right, because Valve came out recently and said that you can't put requirements on their tournaments, right? You can't lock people out of their tournaments. You kind of got to make it come one, come all in terms of their circuits, correct?
I didn't know that, but that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
exactly what needs to
I
happen.
saw that it effectively takes groups like Faceit and others out of contention for running exclusive leagues with exclusive teams where they were doing that before.
That's awesome.
Kind of came out and said open it back up for the people. So you're saying it needs to kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, there was all this grandeur delusions of grandeur
Sure.
from
Yeah.
the perspective of the publisher of, oh, if you want to run a tournament with our game, you have to do it perfectly, and we have to control everything you do.
That was a good evil voice. Billy.
Because we can make money from it, but it turns out
Off
they
the
can't. They
gamers.
can't make money from it.
Right. At least not quickly.
Yeah, and they can't do it right. They can't tell you what to do. We basically have to erase all those restrictions and hope to God that someone who used to run these tournaments at the grassroots level comes back and says, okay, I'm not too burned by this industry. I want to create something again.
Right.
And we can start again building out of the community, which is, again, 99% of the gamers out there.
Everywhere. Yep.
And building back up from the ground and start building up that way. And you're not going to be able to lock it into a certain game. It's going to be Overwatch 2. It's going to be Valorant. It's going to be 500 new games that spring up over the next 5 years.
Right.
Tying it to a specific game isn't going to work. You just have to build it from the community, and you have to build an agnostic group of gamers on all these campuses, hopefully across different campuses, hopefully to replicate the energy that TESPA had, and start running tournaments that they want. Start running competitions that they want. Start finding sponsors who are okay with not being associated with the NCAA of collegiate esports.
Right.
They just want to be part of like a fraternity of collegiate esports, or a sorority.
A collection of people where they're adding value, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So back to grassroots, basically burning everything down that isn't already owned by Riot or Valve, and just building back up from there. And it will happen because gamers intrinsically want to connect with each other, and community and eventually competition arises naturally from that attraction. But we just have to give it time and not tinker with it too much and not try to control it.
Sure. So giving the power back to the people is kind of what I'm hearing on how esports gets back to normal.
Yep. They had all the power originally. They just didn't know it, and the publishers took advantage of that.
Well, Billy, I think we're all looking forward to the day that the power gets back in our gamers' hands. And until then, we're going to keep making sure that people like you have a chance to kind of talk about how the power deserves to be back in the hands of those people. Before we go, Billy, I want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you so they can ask you questions, they can hear your insights, they can see what you're talking about. So tell the people where to find you and where you're at.
I'm on Twitter, but my Twitter is private. You can request to follow me, I guess. It's at Billy Sprout.
Nice.
I don't really have anything to plug.
Sure. And then if you got any esports consulting needs, hit my boy up, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Right. Yeah. If you add me on LinkedIn, I can probably talk to you there. Or on Twitter. I'll probably unlock my account soon.
Sure.
Sorry, it's called X now.
Oh, it's X. Yeah, we've been saying Twitter. We're not accepting X yet. We said Twitter earlier on the show too.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So add me on Twitter at Billy Sprout.
Awesome.
And I'll accept it.
Well, Billy, we appreciate you today, man. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Awkward podcasting handshake.
That's supposed to be my thing, Billy. You're not supposed to call it out, man. It's just supposed to be, exactly.
Oh,
here.
it's a secret thing.
Yeah,
the viewers don't know. It's our little secret.
Exactly, yeah.
Viewers, we did not just shake hands across the microphones. Wink.
Wink. Thank you. Thank you a lot, Billy. Appreciate it.
Well, there you go. One more reason to tune in each and every time and get connected through the Esports Connection, where the esports industry hopefully goes to connect, find out what's happening from the people making it happen. Streaming to you live from our center of the universe at the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.